that one, but hopefully it will be better prepared, not as scattered as the first one was. The first one was a little bit scattered. I tried to wrap it all up, but it was a little bit scattered. Anyway, so today's talk is about the intersection of race, sexuality, and hairstyling. Why are the Black girls called fast? Have you guys heard of the term fast? And I think it's mostly prevalent in the Black community. Black women will say, oh, that little girl over there is fast, or especially the church women. Woo, the church women are good for calling a little Black girl fast. But in the white community, I don't think that's so. There's this meme floating around of a Black little girl with a silk press and a deep side part, and her hair is like down to her, past her shoulders. And then there's a white little girl standing next to her, and her hair is in a similar style. I think the Black little girl maybe has on hoops, and they're standing next to each other. And the caption says, why is a Black little girl called fast, or something to that extent, like why is she considered sexual when the white little girl is not? So in the Black hair care community, in a lot of the groups and stuff, this conversation comes up often, like, why are we over-sexualizing our girls? And I think in a lot of ways, Black women have internalized it as something being wrong with how we think about the world, or we are making our girls overly sexualized. So today I wanted to look in history and see, where does this idea come from? Because I know for a fact that I teach white parents of Black kids how to do age-appropriate hairstyles. And I try to tell them that, you know, braids down to their butt, unless their natural hair grows that long, is inappropriate, or these are just examples. But I try to teach them what age appropriate hairstyles were. But I also wondered, well, where does a lot of this come from? Okay, so that is what we're going to talk about. As you can guess, this goes way back in history. It actually predates slavery. So during the age of exploration, when white folks, Europeans, basically was finding new maps or designing new maps or whatever, they were sending folks out to go find new continents and observe the people there. And a lot of times, the people they sent out was not the best of the best. It was not their best community members. It was not their kings and queens. It was not their most educated. A lot of times, it was the criminals, the people they wanted to forget about. Because remember, during this time, they thought the earth was flat. So if anybody was going to fall off, they wanted people who they didn't really care about that was a part of society to go ahead and fall off the earth, not anybody that was wealthy, well-educated, or anything of that nature, right? So during this time, these explorers were headed over to Africa. So they get on their boat, they ride for a couple of months, depending on which direction they went in. And they get there and they see these indigenous people, and they decide to interpret these indigenous people and how they dressed and how they celebrated their culture and how they celebrated their spirituality by their own understanding, which of course was wrong. So they're looking at Black bodies in very little clothing. So sometimes it's just a piece of loincloth or something like that. And they're dancing or jumping around and speaking their languages. And they decide to say that this was sexual and animalistic. Now, I think, and I don't necessarily have any proof. Oh, did I tell y'all this broadcast is not for the kids. So if you're within earshot of your kids, put your earbuds in, or turn it down or do something, because this one isn't for the kids. But what I think happened is one of these guys, white guys, because, you know, during this time, white women weren't exploring. So during this time, I think one of these white guys decided he found it sexually attractive. He got aroused. And so then he said, well, they were doing it on purpose. They were arousing him. Pimp, sir, you came over here watching them. What they're doing, they're living their best life. This is not for your arousal. It's just that you took it that way. So anyway, it goes down in the history books. I'm sorry, I'm reading the Facebook. Lorelei says, this is interesting. I can't honestly say that this is a stereotype that I've heard. It is real. Melinda says also, I don't think it has been heard to be implied. I've not heard it specifically either, but it's definitely been implied a lot in many communities in which I've lived. Yes. So it goes down in history books that Black people, Africans, are animalistic and they're hypersexual, and they can't control themselves. They have this very aggressive, disgusting way of talking to one another, because, you know, there are different African dialects, and some of them use clicks or different sounds that they weren't using speaking English or British English or whatever they were using wherever they came from. So they decided to paint this negative light and put it in their history books. So now we're going to fast forward to slavery. Slavery along with all its other disgusting things that it encompassed, it also encompassed intentional breeding of Black bodies. So slave owners, whether they were wealthy or poor, thought that they needed as many slaves as possible. And especially the poor ones decided, well, the best way to make more slaves is I'm gonna father them. I'm gonna go ahead and do the do. I'm gonna take one for the team and I'm gonna make a couple of babies, right? That's one way. And I think if you guys watch me talk with Brittany about our Black History selection going on, and I was excited about Elizabeth Keckley, but Elizabeth Keckley is actually a child of this. She was produced or conceived because her slave owner decided to rape her mother and it ended up making her. I'm gonna come back to this and make it make sense. Oh, Lorela, I wasn't saying that you were dismissing it. So the other thing that was happening in slave times is enslaved people were encouraged to breed. So slave owners would say things like, if you have another baby, I'll give you a pig. I'll give you a pig for every baby that you have. They forced them. They physically forced them. They beat them into submission. There were men who were sold as breeders, just like when you go to cattle sales or the state fair. If you ever lived anywhere country and you go to the state fair and the animals are separated by the kind of animal they are and what they would be best at, people were separated the same way, and especially Black people. So we were always commodified and thought of as a tool or a means to an end, even in our core nature of just why can't I think? Just having babies. I know what I'm trying to say, but I got nervous. Y'all, okay, so please forgive me. Anyway, so Black bodies have a long history of being devalued and treated as subsets of humans, and we are said to innately be promiscuous. Our bodies are looked at as tools, commodity. We are treated as breeders and concubine, while white women during this time are always portrayed as being innocent, of being pure, of being giving grace. It doesn't matter what she may have done. She's always the innocent one, right? Reproduction. Thank you, Marie. I don't know why I couldn't get it. Anyway, my bad, y'all. Because I'm also trying to keep up my notes so I don't get it scattered all over again. Okay, so during this time, white men who were more wealthy, who were thought of being educated, developed this whole like underground system of selling the biracial slaves in a genteel market, right? And so these markets were called the quadroon balls. And they basically consisted of bringing in white wealthy men to these balls to convince light-skinned, biracial, mulatto, however you want to say it, depending on what part of the country they were in, to have sexual relations with them. And then after they've performed enough, if the men wanted to keep them, to become kept. So they were given a slightly higher standard in what the average Black person was, because they may have gotten a separate house, almost like a guest house, to become kept in. Or as time went on, the white man may have decided that he would continue to pay her bills or provide her with whatever she needed to maintain her life. It wasn't a great life. She was still working, basically. She was a sex slave, basically, but she wasn't out in the field like the darker skinned solely African slaves were, right? Okay, so we're going to fast forward some more and talk about the Jezebel horror imagery. So from the early explorers up until now to slavery, and even all the way through Jim Crow, this idea of Black women being a whore or being a Jezebel or being sexually promiscuous, even though there really was no basis in that, right? When they were enslaved, they were being forced to have sex. And honestly, if they were left to their own choices, a lot of times the enslaved women chose to have monogamous relationships. So if we're going to talk about Elizabeth Keckley again, Elizabeth Keckley had somebody she considered her father. He was not her biological father. He was the man that her mother married in the best ways that she could. And he was another enslaved African. the person who was biologically her father was her slave master, but she's not the only one. This was very common within the slave community. They would have normal relationships. They would choose to be in monogamous relationships, except for being forced to breed. I'm going to read some of the comments. Lorelai said, "Oh my goodness, this makes perfect sense. This is what justifies the entire process of rape of women and later human trafficking of Black women after slavery." Yes. And so I was listening to an NPR short segment about how even in today's modern time of pornography and human trafficking, of all those things, as far as sexual work, Black bodies are still not considered wealthy. They're still not considered worth much. So out of all the workers, whether they are working by choice or not, they are paid the least. They are given the least amount of resources. So say you are actually wanting to work in the sex industry, you are choosing to be a actress, right? Black actresses are given the worst situations to act in, are given the worst resources. So their cameras are not as good, or their lighting is not good. The setting, the storyline, all that is basically crap, because again, it reinforces that idea that we are just here to be used. We aren't really worth anything. We are still animalistic. So we can say that it actually is still perpetuated in a lot of modern day times. During the Jim Crow era, it was perpetuated by the image of a Jezebel. So there was like a caricature of a Jezebel, and the only opposing image of the Jezebel was the mammy image, which was an overworked, overweight, huge-breasted Black woman in an apron, or you had the scantily clad Black woman who was, of course, seducing all these reluctant white men. She was basically looking at them and captivating them, and then they had no choice but to want to be with her for a moment in time. So it was never the white man was never held accountable for his actions in any of these instances, when he's pretty much the one, or they are the one, that created this whole ideology, right? This whole issue. Melinda says, white standards of beauty are still so prevalent in this country. They are. Lorelai says, exactly what I was thinking. This was portrayed in The Birth of a Nation. Yes, it was. So this Jezebel imagery continued, and it was even as prevalent as they had toys, they had postcards, they had even coffee or drink stirs. It was so pervasive and so normal. This goes into the 1960s, where in 1964, the presidential election between Lyndon Johnson and Barry Goldwater used the political slogan, "All the way with LBJ." So just like the former president that nobody acknowledges, but Trump was like, "Make America Great Again," LBJ's was "Go all the way with LBJ." During that time, a visual for his election was a Black woman who was impregnated, had a Pickaninny hairstyle, and her caption next to her was, "I done went all the way with LBJ." What's more insulting is he won because he received during this time, he received an overwhelming support from Black voters while simultaneously insulting the very Black community, insulting Black women. And yet he still received an overwhelming amount of Black votes. And things like this happen today. But this was just 1964. My mother was alive in this time. And my mother is one of those women who still says Black girls are fast. She said it just the other day in reference to my son. My son is 13. And she's like, "Yeah, you're going to have to protect him from all them little fast girls." And it rubbed me the wrong way, because truth be told, I was considered one of those fast girls. I was one of the ones who, at times dressed inappropriately for school, who had a body of a woman, had a mind of a child, didn't know I still had a mind of a child, caught myself in plenty of situations that I wouldn't have been in. This image is so prevalent that even when Monsters Ball was being casted, Angela Bassett turned it down, saying that the reason why she turned it down is, she said, "It's about character, darling. I wasn't going to be a prostitute on film. I couldn't do that because it's such a stereotype about Black women and sexuality." So she turned it down. Halle Berry took it. Halle Berry won a huge award that's not given to many Black women. She probably got it because she was playing this stereotypical role that is so normalized in our community. Now we're going to look at, because I know somebody's going to say, well, what about rap videos? What about modern music? Modern music, if we talk about it, media is still owned by mostly white men. So yes, in some instances, Black women are choosing to reclaim their sexuality. For instance, I love Lizzo. I don't care if Lizzo show her booty 15 more times. I love Lizzo. Lizzo in and of herself may be reclaiming her sexuality. But if she does not own the entire industry that she sells her music through, or her images, in some way she's still being used the same way. We have people like Kardashian, whatever her name is, has gotten rich off using her imagery. And then not on top of using her imagery, but also changing her image to look more like a Black body. But she's given the grace because she's still a white woman, or whatever she is. She ain't Black. These are the type of things that are happening that's so prevalent that when we are knowledgeable, we get triggered by, and we say, no, that's absolute no. That's cultural appropriation. These are some of the reasons that it comes into play. Now, how does this all translate to hairstyles? Oh, Abbott 5948 says, you definitely know your stuff. Knowledge is so beautiful. Thank you. How does this play into hairstyles? When I'm coaching white parents on how to take care of Black kids' hair, a lot of times there's a disconnect as to why they can't just let their little girl choose any style for themselves. And that's the way you would parent a white girl. She would be able to say she wanted whatever she wants. She wants a side ponytail today. She wanted down to her butt tomorrow. She wants pink and blue. She wants whatever. And it would pretty much fly. She could look a hot mess. She could roll around on the ground with leaves and sticks, walk out the house, and guess what? Everybody's still going to give her that same innocence and say, oh, she's just having a bad hair day, or that's her new style, or she's going through a phase. Black girls don't get that. And I'm not trying to victim blame or shame or say that it's the victim's job to protect themselves at all times from predators. Absolutely not. I think we need to hold predators accountable. However, we would be gaslighting ourselves if we were to say that society does not still operate out of this mental state that Black bodies are still a commodity, that Black bodies and Black girls are ready for sex and ready to be taken advantage of. So when you're talking to your 7-year-old and she wants braids down to her waist, that's not the best choice for multiple reasons. One, she's going to look older than 7 because the hair is so long. If her hair didn't naturally go to that length. Now, this is if her hair didn't naturally grow to that length. If her hair naturally grows there, I'm not saying cut it. You can style it. You can put it in braids however you want to. But if her hair does not naturally grow to that length and she wants extensions to give that appearance, it's going to automatically age her. But also because our society does not give our Black girls the grace that they deserve. We don't get to have just a normal childhood. We're either fulfilling the mammy stereotype or the Jezebel stereotype, no matter what we're doing. We could be minding our own business. And one of those two ideologies is still applied to us unless somebody stops their mindset and says, this is just a little girl. That she's an innocent little girl, but that's not promised to us. So when I give you guys suggestions on hairstyles or say that's age inappropriate, this is where it's coming from. Unfortunately, we have to operate in a way that is trying to protect our girls as much as possible and give them as much of an innocent childhood as possible. And in some ways that feels like we're victim shaming or blaming, but it is not victim shaming or blaming. Until our society moves away from this ideology that our bodies are open to their conquest and use, we are going to continue to have to suggest styles to our girls. And I feel like white girls need some guidance too. Y'all just ain't never been forced to give yourselves guidance, but y'all could use some too. White girls, white boys, all that. Kids need some boundaries, okay? Really, that's really the thing. But we're going to continue to have to parent our girls in this way. And I think what would have been helpful, and I'm not a parenting expert or anything, but like I said, I was one of those little girls that was considered fast. And the only thing that would have changed me is that somebody had taught me to love me more. Telling me not to wear a short skirt because the man on the school, on the train on my way to school may like it, did not deter me. Matter of fact, I may have appreciated his attention because I wasn't getting a positive attention anywhere else. And it's actually how it played out in real life. Telling me that my hairstyle was too grown sounded too abstract. If I had to take care of myself, my brother, work a job, and go to school, then there was no reason I couldn't wear this hairstyle. I'm about to pay for it. So it logically did not make sense. But if somebody had told me that you're setting these boundaries for your body, that you are honoring your body, you're honoring your space, this is how you take care of your hair properly. This is how you honor what God has given you, how you came to this earth, how you accentuate your natural beauty, that would have made sense to me. So this goes back to what I teach y'all all the time about positive affirmations and making sure the kids, Black kids in white households, have plenty of positive mirrors of Black women and Black girls. Yes, some of our popular artists are not the best representation. For instance, Cardi B will tell you straight up that her music is not for kids. We may not want big posters of Cardi B, okay? We may not want big posters of Lizzo's butt, but we can talk about how Lizzo is a true musician. She plays other instruments. How you get the message across in your household is completely up to you. But I do truly believe that if self-worth and self-love is integrated, heavily integrated, and cultural cultural affirmations are also heavily included into your parenting, that it will make more sense than just telling your little girls, don't wear that because you look too grown, or you look too fast, or you do this, or you do that. That is my spiel. I feel like the second time around was less scattered than the first. I hope this was helpful. I'm going to read the last comments over here on Facebook. Let's see. Melinda Palmer said, that was just 9 years before I was born. Yeah, we're not far from it. A lot of the residuals of what was happening in the 60s is still here and prevalent today. Melinda said, Lorelai said, I feel so thankful that you are talking about this, and also so angry that I never knew this. Yeah, there was some stuff that as I was researching this morning, because I wanted to give y'all more concrete, even like statistics, even though I'm not a statistics person, I wanted to give y'all more concrete information on why I talk about age appropriateness and why it's so important. And so I learned stuff today. Like, I didn't know about those balls that they were having just for biracial women to be courted and kept. I didn't know that's where that term kept came from. I don't think I want to be kept. I do want a husband one day if he can deal with my crazy, but I don't think I want to be kept. If it's that, no, thank you. Melinda said it's protection. Absolutely. The truth. And yes, and this was great, Kanisha. Thank you. So thank everyone for listening. I will catch y'all later. Happy Saturday.